Cato, a tragedy by Joseph Addison. Characters, summary, analysis. Hello and welcome to the discourse. Joseph Addison was an English essayist, poet, playwright, and politician who, along with Richard Steele, began the trend of periodic journals with the Tatler and The Spectator. William Thackeray portrayed Addison and Steele as characters in his novel The History of Henry Esmond, which was published in the year 1852. Joseph Addison took birth in 1672. He was educated at Charterhouse School London, and later on he joined the Queen's College, Oxford, for higher studies. He became a close friend of Richard Steele during their school days. Joseph Addison was a supporter of the Whigs. He met Jonathan Swift in Ireland, and together they established the Kitkat Club in 1709. Richard Steele began publishing the Tatler in the same year, and Addison began publishing his satirical, social and political critical essays for the Tatler. Along with Steele, Joseph Addison began publishing the daily periodical The Spectator on March 1, 1711. Addison was a major contributor to The Spectator. The Spectator continued till December 1714. Steele began taking a lesser part in the publishing of periodicals. In 1713, Steele founded another daily periodical titled The Guardian that featured contributions from Joseph Addison, Thomas Tickell, Alexander Pope, and Ambrose Philips. During the same time, Alexander Pope began translating Illiad by Homer, which Thomas Tickell was also working on the same project. Joseph Addison supported the translation of Tickell, and this angered Alexander Pope. Pope was a friend of Addison, and yet he lampooned him in his Epistle to Doctor Arbuthnot as Atticus, in which Pope presented Addison as having great talent that is diminished by fear and jealousy. One of the most celebrated works of Addison was his drama titled Cato, a Tragedy, that he wrote in 1712 and which was first performed on 14th April 1713. The play is based on the last days of Marcus Porcius Cato Uticensis, or Cato the Younger, who resisted the tyranny of Julius Caesar and stood in favor of republicanism against monarchism. Alexander Pope wrote the prologue of this play, while Samuel Garth wrote the epilogue. Characters of Cato, a Tragedy. Cato the Younger, whose full name is Marcus Porcius Cato Uticensis, is a stoic Roman senator who values virtue, honor, and individual liberty above all else. He is the leader of the remaining senators who opposed Julius Caesar's tyrannical campaign to establish a monarchy in Rome. While most of the senators and supporters of republicanism were suppressed and eradicated by Caesar, Cato still stood his ground and fled from Caesar's legions to Utica. His deeds, rhetoric, and resistance to the tyranny of Julius Caesar made him an icon of republicanism, virtue, and liberty. Gaius Julius Caesar isn't an active character in the play, but the plot revolves around him. After defeating Pompey in the Civil War, Caesar became the dictator of Rome and abolished the Senate, and thus ensured the demise of the Roman Republic while giving birth to the Roman Empire. Marcus and Proteus are Cato's twin sons, while Marcia is his daughter. Sempronius is another senator who sided with Cato against Caesar. Sempronius wished to marry Marcia, but Cato rejected his offer, and thus Sempronius resents Cato and plans to betray him to Caesar in exchange of Marcia's hand. Syphax is a Numidian council of Juba. Juba is the Numidian prince whose father Scipio was killed by Julius Caesar during the Battle of Thapsus. Juba idolizes Cato and leads his army in support of Cato against Caesar. Lucius is another senator who loyally supports Cato but realizes that Julius Caesar cannot be defeated in war and thus calls for peace. Lucia is the daughter of Lucius and a friend of Marcia. Summary of Cato, a Tragedy. The play begins as Marcus and Proteus discuss the war against Caesar. They praise their father Cato the Younger's bravery and assures each other of their father's victory. Marcus reveals that he is in love with Lucia, the daughter of Senator Lucius. Proteus too likes Lucia, who is a friend of their sister Marcia. Sempronius arrives and praises Proteus and Marcus for their bravery and says that he too believes that Cato will defeat the tyranny of Caesar. Proteus and Marcus move out for their military duties, and as soon as they go, Sempronius reveals his true intentions and says how much he hates Cato and his entire family because Cato refused his marriage to Marcia, whom he lusts for. Sempronius reveals his treachery and plans to betray Cato and make an alignment with Caesar, who he believes will raise him to first honor and forcibly claim Marcia. Sempronius meets Syphax, his Numidian ally, and suggests to him to persuade Juba to support Caesar and marshal his Numidian armies against Cato. Syphax agrees with Sempronius and goes to Juba to discuss the matter. When Juba hears the treachery, he rebuffs Syphax and claims that he will never betray Cato. Syphax returns to Sempronius and complains that Juba idolizes Cato and his daughter Marcia too much. This further fills Sempronius with jealousy. Meanwhile, Juba sees Lucia and Marcia and proclaims his love for Marcia. Marcia gets annoyed and says that her father would not approve of wasting such precious moments in talks of love during such a dire situation. Juba apologizes and goes away to mend his Numidian army. Lucia cites Marcia for being too harsh against Juba. Marcia says that she cannot be overcome by love at a time like this. Lucia reveals that she is in love with Proteus but is worried about Marcus's temper and the sad effect that their love will have on him. Marcia requests Lucia to control her feelings for Proteus until the war is won, lest she creates more chaos in Cato's house. At the court, Cato calls for a meeting of the remaining Senate to discuss how to stop Caesar from further advancing. Lucius pleads for peace and states that enough blood has been needlessly shed and that it is the time for Rome to yield to Caesar. However, no one supports Lucius. Sempronius, who already plans to betray Cato, calls for war, arguing that it is time for Rome to avenge the deaths of Scipio and others with fire and fury. Cato listens to all the senators and says that both Lucius and Sempronius are only half correct. He says that it is not a time to show unnecessary bravery, nor it is a time to embrace cowardice. He says that he will continue to fight Caesar until he reaches Eutycia, and then only he will bargain for peace. He further says that he will immediately stop the war and be merciful towards Caesar if he surrenders now and stands trial in the Senate. Cato sends an envoy with the message of the decision of his court to Caesar. Juba enters the court and praises Cato's brave decision and promises to stand by him till his last breath. Cato expresses his gratitude to Juba and promises to offer Juba whatever he wants once the war ends. Juba dares and reveals his love for Marcia and asks for her hand in marriage. This angers Cato as he cannot think of marrying his daughter to a Numidian, and he storms out of the court. Meanwhile, Marcus goes to Proteus and reveals how lovesick he is feeling. He says that he cannot live without Lucia and he wishes to marry her at any cost. Proteus listens to Marcus patiently and doesn't reveal to him that he and Lucia are already having a love relationship. He goes to Marcia and tells her that Marcus is deeply in love with her and he is suffering because of his unrequited love. He says that if they continued their relationship and if Marcus came to know about it, he will be heartbroken. Lucia remembers Marcia's pleading and suggestion that she should control her feelings for Proteus, otherwise it will further weaken their family. Lucia declares that she will end her relationship with Proteus, but she will remain a maiden throughout her life. Proteus goes to Marcus and tells him that Lucia is too hurt by the ongoing war and she has declared that she will never marry. Marcus gets sad and says that if he cannot marry Lucia, he will prefer to fight for his father against his enemies till his last breath and die as a martyr. Sempronius and Syphax continue to incite Juba to rebel against Cato, but Juba is too loyal towards Cato and says that after his father's death, Cato is the only person he respects like his father and he will never betray him. Sempronius realizes that his plan will not work and hence he decides to plot his own rebellion. He incites a group of soldiers against Cato and sends them to arrest him. When the soldiers confront Cato, he addresses them with a passionate speech, and all the soldiers turn their heart and vow to remain loyal to Cato. Sempronius realizes that Cato cannot be defeated until the troops remain so loyal to him. He decides to abduct Marcia and abscond with her to join Caesar's forces. He disguises himself as Juba to gain entry to Marcia's apartments. However, Juba himself finds him first and realizing his treachery kills him. Marcia sees Sempronius' body dressed as Juba and mistakes it to be the dead body of Juba. She cries for Juba, claiming that she always loved him and he died before she could admit her love for her. Juba listens to her while remaining hidden behind the curtains. He reveals himself and tells Marcia all about Sempronius' treacherous plan against Cato. Marcia embraces Juba while admitting her love for him. Meanwhile, Syphax succeeds in gathering Numidian soldiers against Juba and Cato. He leads the soldiers to attack Cato. When Marcus learns this, he angrily goes alone to confront Syphax. He kills many rebellious soldiers and slays Syphax, but the soldiers outnumber him and he too dies during the fight. When Cato learns that Marcus got killed while defending him, he praises Marcus while condemning Sempronius and Syphax. He declares that instead of mourning his son, everyone should mourn the fallen Roman Republic, which Marcus died to protect. He then announces that he intends to surrender Utica to Caesar. However, before surrendering, he decides to kill himself as a free man. He laments that the world was made for Caesar and not for virtuous men. He then uses his sword against his abdomen. As he is dying, Marcia and Proteus reach his apartment. They try to save him, but it is too late. Cato gives Marcia his blessings to marry Juba, who he declares is a Numidian with a Roman soul. He also gives Proteus his blessing to marry Lucia. Proteus curses that they live in the kind of guilty world that takes the lives of honest people like Cato and leaves villains like Caesar victorious. He declares that the tragic story of Caesar's conquest will stand forever in history as a warning to all nations of the dire cost of civil war. After Cato's death, Proteus praises him as the greatest soul that ever warmed a Roman breast and says fierce contending nations should know of what dire effects from civil discord flow. So this is it for today. We will continue to discuss the history of English literature. Please stay connected with the discourse. Thanks and regards.